Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for our main event! Hosted by Eric McMahon, it's Cageside with John Morgan!
Holy smokes, what a weekend. UFC 279. We're going to go over it. I would say go back and listen to our last episode in the archives, but guess what? It's obsolete. Don't even waste your time because we didn't go over anything of what actually transpired this past Saturday at UFC 279. I'm your host, Eric McMahon, and like I said, don't go back and watch the archives. But if you do, you can see these two pretty faces. But listen, you're not going to get a lot out of it. I could tell you that. But you can watch us on grindcitymedia.com, YouTube, listen to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Give us a like, give us a click, give us a review, give us a follow. We would greatly appreciate it. Now, I wasn't there at UFC 279. I wasn't there at the press conference. I wasn't there at the weigh-ins when all this craziness transpired, but the guy whose name is on the marquee, he was there. Let me go ahead. Let me bring him in. John Morgan, what the hell happened this weekend?
Well, first of all, Eric, let me disagree with you on one thing. Everybody should go listen to it. It's irrelevant, but go listen to it. We need the clicks. All right, go check it out. But no, listen, honestly, you know, I'm one of these guys that really hates superlatives, right? Where people say this was the greatest ever, the worst ever, the most ever, because it's just hard to really put everything in perspective when you're talking about a list of everything of all time. But I think I can confidently say this was one of the craziest fight weeks I've ever seen in my life. And we were expecting a little bit of chaos.
A Diaz fight week always has some chaos.
I mean, for instance, media day. Nate Diaz showed up like 3 hours late to media day. That's the kind of little bit of chaos we were expecting. A little bit of craziness. You know, he rolled in with like 30 guys, and as he pulled up into the UFC Apex parking lot, you know, we looked outside and we could see him and his crew, you know, enjoying a little recreational use, if you know what I'm saying, right before they came on in. That's the type of chaos that we expected. But no, it went crazier than that. You know, we got this press conference that was canceled, like on the fly, as everybody was there because there was stuff breaking out backstage. You know, everybody's there. We're in position. The cameras are there. The fans are there. Everybody's ready for this press conference, and it gets canceled because there's so much chaos happening behind the scenes that the UFC can't control it. And they said, look, we just know it's the right thing to do to cancel it.
Well, let's stop there, okay? Because we're going to need to take this step by step because the common fan doesn't have this inside knowledge that you have. You were there in attendance. Are you hearing something's happening backstage at the time? Are you sitting there? Are you shocked? I mean, what's going from, you know, the media's perspective in the building? What's happening?
So what we knew, we were all set up and ready to go. We ended up talking to UFC President Dana White after it was canceled. He said he thought we might be able to actually hear what was going on backstage. We couldn't. There's a big curtain. There's a big stage. There's loud music playing. So that's what we were hearing. But apparently kind of all hell was breaking loose behind that curtain. But what we did know is that the press conference was starting late. Again, anytime a Diaz brother is involved, you don't necessarily expect to start things on time. But what was weird is we were kind of all talking to each other in the media, and we were seeing social media posts of guys that were like already in the building. So we're like, well, wait a minute, who are we waiting on right now if we're not getting started? Then all of a sudden we start seeing production crew come out on the stage, and they're moving nameplates around, and they're kind of are changing the way things are happening. Eventually, UFC President Dana White comes out on stage, and he says, listen, and you could see the stress. Like, as he comes out on stage, you could see, like, the stress look in his face. And he's like, we're going to do things a little bit different. And they just brought out 2 fighters. Instead of, there were 6 scheduled to be there. Those top 3 fights were all scheduled to be there. They just bring out 2. They bring out D-Rod, Daniel Rodriguez, and Li Jingliang. Excuse me, that wasn't even the fight they brought. That's the fight that ended up happening. It's so crazy, I can't even keep it straight anymore, man. So they bring out 2 athletes. We do a couple of questions. They do a face-off with just 2 athletes, and then they start to bring out the rest. And eventually just Dana White comes out and says, we're not going to do this. Like, I'm sorry, guys. This just isn't going to happen, and it gets canceled. The crowd boos. I mean, you could see how disappointed. And I know how disappointed they were because, Eric, man, the line, it was at MGM Grand Garden Arena. T-Mobile Arena was booked up where it has been lately, so they went back to the old-school MGM Grand Garden Arena, which is cool because it's got a lot of history there. But the crowd that was lined up waiting to get in, I mean, people were there for hours. You know what I mean? They wanted to get a good seat in line. It's free, but they want to get a good seat. And so they're all lined up and they're hanging out and having a good time, and it just gets canceled. They don't get to see their favorite fighters. So fortunately, we asked UFC PR at that point, hey, can Dana talk to us and tell us what happened? And we went backstage and did a little scrum, and that's when he explained everything that was going on, which basically was, it wasn't that there was a huge brawl. It's just that there was, according to UFC President Dana White, Nate's crew had about 57 people there, and there were about 100 people backstage total between all the different entourages, and there were just these little tiny things breaking out everywhere, and they didn't have their full security team there because press conferences are just kind of quick in and out, do a little something, and there was just so much going on that they just didn't feel comfortable that they contain everything, so they felt it was better off to just cancel it, don't let anything get out of control, and that's what we thought was the chaos. That's what we thought was the chaos.
So,
and then the official weigh-ins happened on Friday.
So I'm watching it live on UFC Fight Pass, right? And it's canceled. So then immediately you go to Twitter because you and a few others are phenomenal follow on Twitter in these real-time updates. And what I originally hear is that Kevin Holland and Khamzat Chimaev, they get into a beef, not to be outdone by Nate's Diaz crew and that whole team coming in, and then him and Khamzat then getting into it. Water bottles are being thrown. So it's almost a three-way fracas, I guess you can say, but with a central player at the middle of it.
100%. I mean, there's no question about it. Khamzat Chimaev was the one that instigated this stuff. I mean, and listen, he's aggressive. He's a bit wild. That's part of who he is, right? Like, it's like, I grew up in the war in Chechnya. I am battle hardened, and I'm going to smash everybody. I'm going to kill everybody. And listen, that's part of kind of his aura. It's part of who he is. I think it's honest. I think it really is who he is. Everything you hear behind the scenes, he's incredibly aggressive. But situations like this, the guy's got to rein it in a little bit, man. You got to play the game just a little bit. You can't start getting UFC events canceled. I mean, at some point, the brass is going to push back. I mean, these are big events. As Dana White said, like, look, it ended up all working out okay, right? But they have these press conferences because they want to get those face-off videos. They want to get those little sound bites. They want to get the little clips that come from it because that's all marketing materials, right? I mean, that's all things they can push out over those last couple of days to raise awareness for the pay-per-view. And so at that point, yes, it's who you are. And yes, that aggression, people love to see it. But you're being a little counterproductive because you're now getting promotional events essentially canceled. You're costing potentially the company money, and they're not going to put up with that forever.
Yeah, man, you can mess a lot of things. You don't mess with those dollars. So, and that's what obviously it happened. So the craziness goes, and it's the talk of the town. I mean, more of the time, it's the talk of the internet. I mean, I was just infatuated with it. So as the MMA nerd I am, guess what I'm tuning into? I'm tuning into real life, updates the next morning about these weigh-ins. I originally then hear, now whether this is true or not, how much is that Chimaev's coming in, the first reports was 10 to 12 pounds overweight. And I can't even do this justice because it was hard to keep it straight. There was so many like crazy reports going on out there, but you were there. What are you knowing in real time? What exactly happened? Take us through it.
So here's what we see. First of all, it's really interesting, right? So we show up for the official weigh-ins first thing in the morning, about 8 a.m. Las Vegas time. We get our cameras set up, streaming set up. We're all ready to go. And we see out in the hallway of the UFC Apex where the weigh-ins are, Kevin Holland and UFC matchmaker McMahon having a very intense discussion. And normally when you see something like that, the matchmakers are there in case something goes wrong, right? Because if somebody misses weight or there's an issue, now you got to start shuffling the card a little bit, right? So when we see this conversation happening, it's like, what's going on here? Now, and remember, the whole thing that instigated the whole melee at the press conference was Khamzat Chimaev coming up and, attacking Kevin Holland. And then the Nate Diaz crew came in. But I feel bad almost putting it on Nate Diaz's crew. It's just that there were so many of them that was a problem. So we see this conversation happen. We're thinking, what's going on here? Like, what could possibly be happening? But then, and if you've never seen a weigh-in, they have 2 hours. There's a 2-hour window that the fighters have to weigh in. They can come in at any time during that and weigh in. Kevin Holland is first on the scale. And so we thought, well, why is he first? They were just having discussion. What's going on? So immediately, it's just weird. You know something's going on. You don't know what's going on, but something is happening because that discussion wouldn't have been happening if something was going on. But then he weighed in first, and because originally I thought, well, maybe they're going to ask him. Maybe something's up with Nate Diaz. Maybe something up with Hunt. Maybe they're going to ask him because he was scheduled for a 180-pound catchweight bout. Maybe they're asking him if he can actually make 170. Could he go cut 8 pounds in an hour? I mean, it's tough, but it can be done. Not advisable, but it can be done. But he waited first. So at that point, we all realized something's going on, but nobody knows exactly what's going on. So now you start reaching out to all your contacts. Now you start sending out the text messages. Now you reach out, and that's when we start hearing all the things that, hey, listen, it does not look like Khamzat Chimaev is going to make weight. So what are you going to do at that point? And it's a weird situation because Nate Diaz, very public, very clear, last fight of his contract coming into this, right? So he wants to get his contract done because he wants to test the free agent market. Understandable. He's one of the biggest stars in the sport. He wants to see what else he can do out there. But is he going to face somebody that isn't even trying? And I hate to say it that way, but when you're 9 pounds over, Eric, you've been around the game a long time. That's when you start, did you even try? Now, as it turns out, listen, he did try. There was a doctor that came in and shut it down. Look, weight cutting is one of the weird things about our sport. It's all accepted, but we all know it's incredibly unhealthy. It's not good for you. And if a doctor comes and visits an athlete during a weight cut, the first thing they're going to say is, stop cutting weight. You're dehydrating yourself. So he was told to stop cutting weight. But that's the thing you get as a fighter. When somebody misses that bad, you start going, did you even try? Were you even serious?
I need to jump in here really quick because I still want to go down the chain of events, but and through Twitter, a lot of fighters have even said this, like, I've never had a doctor check in on me. The simple fact that a doctor is getting, quote unquote, summoned to a hotel room is that there is dramatic problems even to start. So like when, Khamzat is saying like the doctors forced me, it's somebody had to call the doctor in first, right?
Yeah, no, I think he was having some severe issues. From what I've heard behind us, he was having some severe issues. I mean, for people that don't understand, I mean, weight cutting, again, it's such a weird part of our sport because it is just so generally accepted, but some people do it in a very, very unhealthy manner. Essentially, what you're doing is you're taking the water weight out of your body. You're dehydrating yourself. It's such a weird practice, man. You're getting your body incredibly dehydrated 24 hours or 36 hours before you're about to have one of the most like grueling, physically testing activities on the planet. But unfortunately, it's something that athletes do so that they can come in the next night as the bigger athlete, that they can have an advantage in size, potentially strength about it. But yes, you're right. Doctors do not make it, and organizations do not make it a practice to just come in and check on you to see how you're doing. There were some medical issues are the reasons that the doctors were brought in to begin with. And again, any medical doctor right away is going to say, bro, the reason you're having this medical issue right now is you're dehydrating yourself. Get some fluids in your body. This ain't good.
Yeah, and there's tales for days about, people dying during weight cuts. I just small little story, and we'll get back to it. I had a weight cut that went, awry one time, and I'm not gonna say I lost vision, but my vision was blurred for hours, and I couldn't hold down water. I would drink water, I'd throw it right back up. But the thing that scared me, your eyes need water to function. And so I had like double vision, and it scared the day. And that's not even to mention that like I could barely pick myself up off the ground. But that's how crazy these weight cuts get. And when you could theoretically lose 10% of your weight and not die, but when those things start happening to you, it's horrific on your body. So I digress. That's all happening. His weight cut is going miserably, whether he's trying, whether he's not trying, whether he came in way overweight. Can he make 170 moving forward? Who knows? But that message has to get to Nate Diaz. When does it get to Nate Diaz?
So what we know is he got to him as he was basically cutting the last part. So he was doing the final part of his weight cut. But here's what we kind of knew at that point. The fight's gonna be in jeopardy at that point, right? Because we're hearing Khamzat Chimaev is gonna miss big. We know that, first of all, Nate Diaz inside the fight community, we know that every fighter has one requirement, right? Make weight.
Yep.
That's it. Like that is that when you sign the contract, You have signed to make weight on this date. The training, the fight, all that, but you have signed to make weight. Nate Diaz, Nick Diaz, his brother, I mean, they've both adamant about this throughout their career. Be a professional, make weight, show up, do it. This was a bad matchup for Nate Diaz. We talked about it, right? Khamzat Chimaev was a massive favorite. Nate knew it wasn't the greatest matchup for him. I mean, he kind of alluded to it as well. You got this young killer against me, the veteran. Of course, Nate's game, and he's like, I'm going to push it to the end. But now you say, okay, this is the new up-and-coming killer, and now he didn't even make weight. So that Nate Diaz is not going to accept the fight. You would assume. The only thing we thought maybe he might accept the fight, even though this would be a horrible circumstance for him, is that he's just trying to get out of his contract so bad that maybe he'll take the fight just to get a little bit, to get paid, throw a little extra money my way. We get paid, and then I go on my free agency. But in all likelihood, we assumed that the fight was very much in jeopardy. So at that point, you start figuring out what's going on. And then the chaos remained. I mean, listen, everybody comes in, they do their way. Khamzat Chimaev comes in, weighs in, 170, and he's way overweight. And this just made it even worse, man. Okay, so here's another thing. If you're kind of new to the fight game, there are some unwritten rules, right? If you come in now, again, I told you earlier, you have 2 hours to make weight. Khamzat comes in with 30 minutes remaining in the window. So hold on. If you're trying to maximize, if you are actually trying to make weight, you still have 30 minutes to go. He didn't use those 30 minutes. And then not only did he not use those 30 minutes, but he came in kind of laughing, smiling a little bit like, what are you going to do? 179? Crazy, huh? And it's just, it's disrespectful, man. It's disrespectful of your opponent. It's disrespectful of the game. It's disrespectful of the organization. The unwritten rule there is when you come in and you've missed weight bad, that you kind of show some remorse. You kind of sit up there and you keep your head down and you apologize, and maybe maybe you give it one of these on the scale. Instead, he's kind of laughing and comes back and flips off the camera, and it just, man, it wasn't good, man. As he left after that, the media in there is all kind of looking at each other like, is this dude serious? Is that the way he's really going to handle this? Like, no remorse whatsoever, no care, no concern at all. And it just wasn't a good scene. And then at that point, we don't know what's going on. We have no idea what's going to happen with the fight. Nobody's really talking. We're talking to PR, and we're like, hey, can we get some update, some announcement? Is this fight going to happen? Is the commission going to allow it to happen? I mean, there's a huge weight discrepancy. We don't really know what's going on, and that lasts for several hours. Eventually, we're hanging out, and the public relations team is like, hey, listen, we got to go back to the office. We don't know what's going on either. We'll tell you as soon as we can. And we all just kind of had to pack up our gear. And as we left the UFC Apex, this was around, 1 p.m. or so. We still don't even know who's going to fight. We've got the ceremonial weigh-ins that start at 4 p.m. Pacific time. It's 1 p.m. and we don't even know what fights are happening, who's facing off with who. It was one of the most bizarre scenes you'll ever see.
So I'm glad you brought up the commission right there, because that, like, from being a referee, I have to work with the commission a lot, right? And that's essentially who I work for. I don't work for a promotion. I work for the commission of the state where the event is. Now, from what I do know, and then this got publicized that day, is there are rules. The commission has rules day before of, for not just opponent change, main event opponent changes. And so there's all these things. Or are you guys in that moment diving that deep into maybe even those rules at the time?
Yeah, absolutely. Just because this is something that we've done so often, you know what I mean, with the weigh-ins and stuff that we've studied. We've gone back and, there was a time where the UFC, they had a horrible stretch where it seemed like every week they were losing the main event and things have happened. I mean, it wasn't crazy like this. This was just chaotic from a whole different sense. But yes, we're thinking about, okay, so what does that mean? How much weight can there be? There is a sliding scale. It's not a flat number per division of how far apart athletes can be. What does this do? So yeah, definitely. So it wasn't at that point. It's two things. You're saying, okay, A, what's the promotion's involvement here, and what are they seeing, and what do they want to do? But B, what is the commission doing? You know what I mean? What's their involvement? What are they going to stop? So a lot of questions. And not a lot of answers during that time period. It was pretty wild.
So Dana White then comes out on Instagram and says, hey, everybody, check out my Instagram Live. In about 10 minutes, I'll be going on SportsCenter and my Instagram Live, UFC Live, with updates about this card. Now, the rumors were swirling. We almost knew just by attrition, what was going to happen in this. Because from Nate Diaz's standpoint, we all knew there ain't no way he's fighting this guy on a principle standpoint. And I think everybody in this game 100% agrees with him. There's just no way that's going to happen. They're going to have to throw a lot of extra zeros even to have him fight at that point, I would assume. So Dana White says all this. Hey, go on my Instagram, Sports Center, which didn't get to cover it, by the way, because a U.S. Open match went long and pissed me off. And then, so I have to go on his Instagram live instead of watching it on the couch at home, nice and comfortable. I'm watching it on my little damn screen. But he then gives the new matchups. Do you learn in real time? Does you, John Morgan, learn in real time, or do you get tipped off before so you can have the tweets ready, the posts ready?
So here's the thing: is in that morning flurry, and we're talking to contacts, reaching out to sources. We had kind of figured out what the working plan was, right? We had talked to enough people behind the scenes. We knew the idea was, okay, here's the 3 new matchups. We're going to shuffle all 3 of them. You're going to have Nate Diaz versus Tony Ferguson in the headliner. You're going to have Khamzat Chimaev versus Kevin Holland, which kind of makes sense, and you're going to have D-Rod, Danny Rodriguez against Li Jingliang. That's what it's going to be. But the thing is, look, you got to get all 6 of those athletes to agree to that, and that's on one day's notice for 6 fighters to say, listen, I'm going to change my opponent one day ahead of time. We're not just talking about Nate here. I mean, Nate was the chief principal, right? With the one that we knew there's no way he's going to fight Khamzat Chimaev missing weight by that much. But you got to get everybody involved. Everybody's got to be on board with it. And listen, I'm sure that involves some contractual demands. Hey, listen, yeah, I'll do that for you, but I need you to kick me a few extra bucks here. Hey, I'll do that for you, but I want to scrap my agreement and I want a new contract moving forward. Hey, I'll do that for you, but here's my list of demands. And you got to do that 6 times, right? So that was a scramble of getting in the end. So we kind of knew what the plan was. It was just a matter of, can they get all this done and can they get everybody on board? And if they don't, what do you do from there? I mean, how do you save this pay-per-view event? How do you save this card? And so when the announcement was made at 3 p.m. Pacific time on that stream, it was confirmation of what we had heard was going to happen, but it was the first time that we officially knew live as UFC President Dana White was announcing that, yes, it's done. Everybody's on board, and here's what we're going. And think of it, it's less than 60 minutes before they're all supposed to be on stage facing off with each other at the ceremonial weigh-ins. It was wild. It was wild.
So new matchups, 60 minutes away from ceremonial weigh-ins, 24 hours out from the event. It is Nate Diaz in the headliner versus another legend in Tony Ferguson. In the co-main, you have Kevin Holland and Khamzat Chimaev, the 2 principals involved in the fracas of the day before. And then, arguably the guy who gets the biggest shaft of Li Jingliang versus D-Rod. And we can dive into that later, but giving up then 10 pounds and, hey, man, tip of the cap to that guy. If everybody says they're a gangster, that was the gangster of that day, right? But yeah, so 100%. Ceremonial weigh-ins go on. Now, listen, it probably sold more pay-per-views.
It did. There's no question about it. It's the craziest thing because that's what came out as it was all settling in. Everybody, the new bouts were announced. Everybody kind of thought, man, you know what? This is actually a little bit more intriguing, right? I mean, we talked about it last week. Hey, Nate Diaz might be able to make this thing go long. He might be able to try to tire out Khamzat Chimaev, but most likely this destroyer of men in Khamzat Chimaev is going to run right through Nate Diaz. Now you go, wait a minute. We got Nate Diaz against another OG, another superstar in Tony Ferguson. So not only is it cool because these dudes have both been in the game so long, but from a competitive standpoint, it's a much more even match. The line came out, and it was the betting line came out, and it was basically a pick 'em, and then it was kind of bouncing back and forth between who was the favorite. So it was like, okay, hold on, that's more competitive. Then, as you said, Khamzat Chimaev and Kevin Holland are going to fight. Wait a minute. They've been having kind of a war of words on social media. They had this big blow up in the back yesterday. Okay, all right, I like that. And then D-Rod versus Li Jingliang. As you said, the one that got shafted here is Li Jingliang because he ended up having to accept the fight with a guy that was, 10 pounds heavier than he was. But still on paper, it was like, okay, the styles that they bring to the cage, that's a fun, competitive matchup, other than the fact that Li Jingliang is giving up all that weight. But you looked at that reshuffled lineup and you thought, this might actually be a better lineup. And, you touch on some of those commission rules. One of the commission rules is that if you have a change in the main event, that ticket buyers have the right to get a full refund on their tickets because, that is not the bout that they purchased tickets for. UFC President Dana White says afterwards, we didn't get a single request for a refund. And not only that, during that time period where we didn't even know what the lineup was, we sold another 250 tickets, which is just crazy and goes to show you the power they had. But honestly, as nutty as it all was, the lineup actually ended up being, by all accounts, I don't think I've talked to anybody who said I was disappointed by the new match. Everybody I know said, look, I like this lineup better.
Well, and from a main event standpoint, because essentially the common fan is buying the main event. I think from the main event, you had two guys with endless gas tanks. You had two guys with very unorthodox styles. What is going to happen? But now, day of the event, okay? The fight card started. Everybody's jazzed. I mean, the T-Mobile Arena is buzzing. You for once missed a pay-per-view. You're at Imagine Dragons, but you did catch it on ESPN Plus pay-per-view afterwards. So we're going to break it down. And we'll spend just a little bit of time. Li Liang, the Leech, look at my pronunciation's getting a lot better.
I like it.
Going against D-Rod. 10-pound weight cut. And it was a good fight. It was like one of those each guy is worried about the other guy's power a little bit. So there wasn't a lot of wild, crazy exchanges. It was all on the feet. But the Leech comes out, on the losing end of a split decision victory. Very controversial, by the way. What say you?
Yeah, to be honest with you, I thought Li Jingliang won the fight. So, as you said, a rare pay-per-view miss for me, but I had these plans with my son to go see Imagine Dragons at Allegiant Stadium. Bought the ticket 6 months ago. I was like, I'm keeping the plans with my kid. You have
Dad
to do that
of the year. I love it. Dad of the year. As a dad of two, I respect that.
It was hard. When this pay-per-view first got announced, initially I was going to cancel, and I'm like, no, that's not the right thing to do. I made these plans with my son. I'm going to keep them. So I did it. But so I did a good job of avoiding spoilers, by the way, too, man. I stayed off my phone during the concert. I wanted to watch the fight and not know what was going on. So as I was watching it, it was like it was happening live. I was having a little bit of that, kind of anxiety of not being there. I was bummed, but I knew I had done the right thing. So I watched that fight unfold. I thought Li Jingliang won the fight. In fact, as they go to announce the winner, it goes to decision, as they line up, I was actually even shocked it was a split. I thought it was so clear that Li Jingliang won that when they started announcing the split decision, I was like, whoa, one judge had it for D-Rod? What? Like, that's crazy. No, not one. Two judges had it for D-Rod. He walks away with the win. Yeah, disappointing, man. So Li Jingliang, it took, I think, a tougher fight in the reshuffled lineup. Fights well. As we said, that's part of the problem of taking a fight on 24 hours notice. One of the big challenges is instituting a game plan and planning. You spent 6 weeks or 8 weeks kind of getting ready for one guy, and then in one day you say, no, I'll fight somebody completely different. And in Jingliang's situation, as you said, D-Rod had been preparing for a 180-pound catchweight match with Kevin Holland, so he came in, at 179. So tough one, man. Tough one for the Leech. Luckily, I think the Leech is, he's a popular figure. Just the enthusiasm that he brings to the cage with everything he does. He kind of became like a storyline behind the scenes with the custom suit from the Embedded that he never got to show to anybody.
I'm glad you say that. So that was my next topic, and you totally jumped the gun on me here. But listen, the biggest loser and or potentially winner of this whole night was Li Jingliang and the suit. I mean, the suit became this mythical creature on social media because we all watched Embedded. He got first time he's in this prominent. He's going to be on stage in the press conference. He's practicing his English for it. He gets this just to the nines suit and he says, everybody, you'll be able to see it at the press conference. And then, oh shit, he doesn't.
It's so funny, man. It's one of those storylines, and that, I don't know, that's what makes this sport so fun, is I think people pick up on little stuff like that, and it becomes, a big story of the week. And as you said, he's in Embedded, getting custom fitted for a suit. He's got it on at the press conference, can't wait to show it. And just as he's about to walk on stage, they cancel the press conference. Like, we're not doing this. So he doesn't get to show.
This like sad puppy. They just turn him around, and with the language barrier, he doesn't really know what's going on. He's like,
what do you mean the press conference is canceled? So then well, I'll win my fight, and then I'll get to wear it to the post fight, and I'll show off my custom suit. Doesn't get to do that because we only take the winners to the post fight press conference. Loses a controversial split decision, doesn't get to wear the suit. I don't know what you do with the suit now. What do you do with the suit? I mean,
Dude, I mean, if the UFC has a Hall of Fame, that needs its own wing.
I mean, look, now you got to think though, right? On the one hand, you could save the suit for the next time to debut it at the next press. On the other hand, maybe that suit's got some bad mojo with it. You know what I mean? Maybe you got to get rid of that suit, man. That suit is cursed.
I have a feeling, though, in retrospect, his stock is higher now. His paycheck was higher. And listen, he didn't lose anything. He was going up in weight, a totally different fighter. The guy is a media darling now. And so if all things are equal, it ended up working out for him.
I think so. And that's another great part about the sport of MMA, right? Is like wins and losses are certainly important. I mean, we follow champions, we follow dominant, win streaks and things like that. But like even consider like Nate Diaz. I mean, Nate Diaz's career record ain't all that great in terms of like stacking it up against like a Fedor Emelianenko or, no, I mean, he's had his share of losses, but we love him, right? Because we love the style that he brings to the cage. We love the fact that we know he's going to come in there. Li Jingliang is that same person. I mean, it's hilarious because he barely speaks any English whatsoever, but his enthusiasm is undeniable. His fighting style, his willingness to do this is incredible. I agree with you. I don't think it's stock drop. I will, Eric. I found myself in a weird situation because I am one of the journalists that votes on the rankings panel, right? And I had him in there at number 14. I didn't have D-Rod in there, but what do, right? D-Rod won the fight. I don't think he won the fight, but he actually did win the fight. And I don't think you can deny the results of the fight. So I did put D-Rod in and took Li Jingliang out. So, I mean, listen, he's just right outside the top 15 of the rankings. So he's right there and he could get right back in. But, I mean, overall, I don't think it's the worst thing that could happen to him, but there are consequences with every result.
No, I hear you. And now let's go to the co-main here where Bad Blood was obviously involved after the fight. It looked like they were best friends forever. But Kevin Holland versus the Wrecking Machine, the Chechnyan, the Chechnyan killing machine. I will smash everybody, Khamzat Chimaev. And he looked every bit the wrecking ball, the war machine that we thought he was. And if anybody thought that he was going to come out and do that to Kevin Holland, I'm going to call you a liar. Listen, I thought he was going to be Kevin Holland. Let's just be honest. I thought he was. Styles make matches, but the way he did it, he threw one strike. Kevin Holland threw 0 strikes. And he is one of the highest level wrestlers you can get to is Chimaev. And he showed it. First off, was it dirty or was it not dirty? Kevin Holland went in for that hand tap and Khamzat said, nope, we did this beforehand. He shot right under for the duck under, took him down, took his back. Bam. Take us from there.
I don't love it, man. To be honest with you, was it dirty? I don't love that. I mean, listen, the truth is, as you know, as a referee, obviously protect yourself at all times. It's not, everything's fair play. You know what I mean? But you see that a lot, that respect, that you come out and glove touch. Now, I will think it's a little bit weird. All this bad blood, all this trash talking, and you want to touch gloves with them? Like, nah, let's be ready to go. And so I would advise anybody facing Khamzat Chimaev moving forward, avoid that glove touch because you said Khamzat just shot right under it, got in on the takedown. Now, do I think, can I sit here and be like, well, Eric, the only reason he got the takedown was because he was dirty and shot under? No, he was going to get the takedown anyway. Let's just be honest. I mean, Kevin Holland kind of admitted going in, look, my wrestling isn't great, but Kevin Holland is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. So to your point where you say, who thought this was going to happen? I agree with you. I thought Khamzat Chimaev, when this was announced, was the right favorite. But you did say, okay, but what if Kevin Holland, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, can last a little bit on his back? What if he can be a little bit tricky? What if he can get out of some spaces? What if it kind of similar to what we thought with Nate Diaz to some degree is on his back? Can he survive in there? Khamzat Chimaev is he's relentless. He's powerful. He chain wrestles is incredible. And he locked up the Darce choke and got the finish in a little over 2 minutes. Just absolutely impressive. Khamzat's the real deal. Kevin Holland, I think is in a very similar position to Li Jingliang, right? Where you're like, okay, you lost. It wasn't great. But Kevin Holland, you were willing to step up and face Chimaev on a day's notice where people don't want to face him, period. You did it on a day's notice. He kind of came out afterwards and said, I lost the grappling match. As you said, no punches thrown. It wasn't really a fight. I lost the grappling match. It was a fight, but I like what you're going with there. People still want to see Kevin Holland fight. He's fun. He's entertaining. He talks trash. He has a good time. They still want to see him fight. But that's the real deal, man. That's what makes this so frustrating, right? And by the way, I should say, shout out to the Las Vegas crowd. that booed the hell out of Khamzat Chimaev when he came out for the ceremonial weigh-ins, when he came out for the fight. I don't know if that's going to last. I'm really interested to see how the crowd reacts the next time he fights, right? Because he had kind of become a little bit of a fan favorite because people are like, man, I love this guy. He just destroys people. But, you miss weight by 9 pounds, you screw up the event, you should be booed. And I'm proud of the crowd for doing that, for understanding that, hey, while I may respect this guy, I may like this guy, he messed up and he deserves to be booed for it. So I'm interested to see what happens moving forward.
And he went full heel with it. He embraced it.
Oh, he did embrace it, and good on him. And he said afterwards, like, I don't care if you boo me. I'm not here to impress you. I'm here, to feed my family and this sort of thing. So look, Khamzat Chimaev is that's what's so frustrating about this whole situation, right? Is Khamzat Chimaev is unbelievably talented. Now there are still the question marks, right? What if somebody does survive that first barrage, right? It's like back in the day when you were growing up, you were playing Mike Tyson's Punch Out, right? You're like, I got to survive that first minute and a half. If I get past that first minute and a half and those uppercuts, now maybe I got a chance. I think it's still like that with Khamzat Chimaev is, if you can get past that first round, that second round, if you can get him in deep waters, does that, because, man, he's coming out there with such aggression, with such an energy assertion that, you just wonder, can he hold that for 25 minutes? But, he's just so overwhelming early on. So that's what makes this thing frustrating is Khamzat Chimaev looks like the absolute real deal, but screwed up the press conference, risked screwing up the entire event. Luckily, everybody scrambled and got it saved. But where does he fight next? Like, can he make welterweight anymore? Are we looking at him as a welterweight contender, or do we just assume automatically he's got to go to middleweight? He's got to go to 185 pounds. That's what Dana White said afterwards. He said, look, I think we got to look at him at 85. I tend to agree with that. He's a big dude. He missed tremendously here. Doctors or not, I mean, there was a medical issue to get it looked at. So I think that's what's kind of frustrating about this is you have this great performance and now you go, yeah, but what now? What now?
I think everybody knows you only have a certain number of those weight cuts in you before you have to give it up. I mean, there's a lot of fighters that are going to tell you that. So, he looks the real deal. He looks scary doing it, truth be told. Like, I was like, oh my goodness, this guy is amazing. And give it up for Kevin Holland. I mean, I thought he was out of that Darce on 2 different occasions, only for the third time for it to go. I thought he was he was escaping the back on multiple occasions. Khamzat just flowed and rolled through with him every time. It's just, you saw 2 high level wrestler and jiu-jitsu versus high level jiu-jitsu. And it was that 2 minutes was an exciting 2 minutes. But let's go on to the main event. The guy who this card was all made around in his final fight of his contract, Nate Diaz versus the legend, El Cacui, Tony Ferguson. And I got to start by saying this. And I was personally thoroughly disappointed in the fight. Just from a standpoint of, I did not see the Tony El Cacui Ferguson that I just grew to love. This relentless, moving forward, unorthodox striker. And with a guy who may be doing some rolling thunders too. Who the hell knows what he was going to do? What I saw, it was a guy very unsure of himself out there and just looked completely off balance the whole time. Did you see the same thing I saw?
Yeah, listen, at this point, Tony Ferguson, definitely a legend, 38 years old at this point, coming off those losses. You do wonder how all those have impacted him. And not just impacted him physically, but just impacted him mentally as well. You have those setbacks and you wonder how, it affects your confidence level. It affects your, I think confidence is a big part of it, knowing, what you're able to implement and what you shouldn't and how you should move and what happens if you go in and you get caught. You think about, the May result against Michael Chandler. Tony Ferguson didn't look bad in that fight. He looked okay, right? And then all of a sudden, one shot changed everything and you're unconscious on the floor. And so you wonder, kind of what was happening there. You add in the fact that, Tony Ferguson, while I think it's great that he kind of changed up his training routine, was training with some new people, was getting some new advice, it takes time to implement that sometimes. If you're trying to change things, especially if you're at the point in your career where Tony Ferguson is, things are so ingrained in you and they're so, habit at that point. What's your mindset as you're trying to implement new tactics, new processes. So, yeah. And again, go back to the fact that the whole thing was put together on 24 hours notice, So now you've got an opponent in a different stance. You've got an opponent that's got a different game plan, a different style. So a lot of things factored in here. But yeah, it wasn't, I would say, on the one hand, it was cool to see these 2 legends. This should have fought a long time ago. As they both said, I can't believe they hadn't fought up till now. It was cool to see them both in there. It was cool to see the love that both were getting from the crowd. Everybody respecting these legends. The fight itself, I would say, a little bit weird. You know what? In some ways, it kind of reminded me a little bit of like Anderson Silva and Nick Diaz, where you're like, you see people in there and you're like, what's going on here? What are you doing here? This is not what I expected to see, between two legends. Not the greatest fight of all time. I think, still more competitive than what we probably would have seen had it been Khamzat Chimaev and Nate Diaz. And ultimately, of course, you get the Nate Diaz submission win in the fourth round, which is,
at 2:09 of the fourth round.
I know, pretty funny, right? And the way this thing worked out for Nate Diaz, I mean, you hate to talk about luck, right? And it always seems that the people that get the best luck are the ones that are the most prepared and the ones that put in the time, right? But I mean, you think about it, right? The reason everybody hated this fight when it was announced is because everybody knew it was Nate Diaz's final fight in his contract, and it looked like the UFC was just trying to get him destroyed by Khamzat Chimaev on his way out the door. Instead, Nate makes weight. Khamzat doesn't. So now right away, Nate never has to deal with Khamzat again, because if they tried to put the fight together at some other point, he's like, bro, we were supposed to do that before. You didn't make weight. You didn't show up. I'm not interested. Now he's a free agent. UFC President Dana White's talking good about him, saying, listen, nothing but love. The man's a legend. I wish him nothing but the best in whatever he does next. Looks like maybe he's going to go box, but he's also saying, I'll come back to the UFC. I mean, this thing just worked out amazing for Nate Diaz. Another chapter in the lore of this fan favorite. And for Tony Ferguson, I think what's evident right now with Tony Ferguson, and when I watch that performance, is just that the championship contender days of Tony Ferguson are definitely done. But I think Tony Ferguson is kind of reaching that Nate Diaz-like status in the fact that, man, this is a dude that's been in the game for 15 years. He's paid his dues. He's given us some incredible performances. He didn't get the title shot that he probably should have gotten when he was on his run, but he deserves whatever he wants to do. If he wants to stick around and have a few more fights, put a few more bucks in the bank, against guys of his stature, against kind of fellow veterans, then let him do it. You know what I mean? Let him do it. It seems like the UFC has that respect for him as well. So it's crazy. 5 straight losses. There's not many guys that can deal with 5 straight losses and you still say, hey, I'll watch that guy fight again. But that's the way I feel about Tony Ferguson. 5 straight losses. I'll watch the guy fight again.
Absolutely, I will. But I really do hope that I want to digress. The one thing that struck me in that night, and I wanted to get your opinion on this, is over the course of the last 5 years, he's been fighting at 155. He was at 170. And that may be where the off-balancedness, the somewhat timidity that he had that night, the turning the back on multiple occasions when his corner is imploring him. I wonder if that carrying that extra weight had anything to do with it, any of that.
It's interesting. It's funny you say that, because I'm struggling to figure out what weight class he should be in next as well. Because I will say this, man, when I saw him weigh in at 170, he looked so much healthier. We talked about all this, the weight cutting issue and what it does to the body. His last couple weight cuts at 155, Friday morning seeing him, I'm like, man, he is drawn out. Like, he does not look healthy at all, and he mentioned that because this was 170, he was able to kind of lift a little bit more weights and put on some more muscle. And I thought on the scale, he looked a lot healthier, but as you said, the performance maybe didn't translate as well. So I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question, because something wasn't 100%, but there was so much weirdness and wildness and so much going on. I kind of think I'd like to see him at 170 again, maybe in a different situation where it's, it's the opponent that he was preparing for, and there's not all this chaos and bizarre circumstances. He's got a little more time to work with the team. He's got a little bit more time to put in, a full training camp and really prepare for one person. So I think I'd like to see one more at 170, just because to me, he looked healthier on the scale. Mm-hmm. But like I said, I think the elite level, the championship contender, Tony Ferguson, I hate to say it because I love the guy, man. He's such a great character and such a great fighter, but I think those days are done.
And rolling with El Cacui since his Ultimate Fighter days, where I first got introduced to him, man, I wanted to see him get those big fights. I'm glad he finally did, kind of against the Nate Diaz. I'm glad he got that. It was a shame that he never really got that ultimate push that he really deserved. Call it just blind, dumb luck that he never did. But Nate Diaz, where do we see him next? Because in his post-fight interviews and everything, he was kind of cryptic, as the way I took it at least. Hey, I'm going to be out here. I may be back in the UFC before long, but I'm going to go show everybody how to do it outside. And so I started, the way my brain internalizes things, I start putting together a list. Does that mean boxing? Does that mean fight promoting? Yes and yes, probably. But I also think of just like how he's marketed himself, how he's done anything. Can he get into the representation game? Can he become an agent? Can he become a manager? Like, I look at some guys that are going to take, this crazy Nate Diaz approach to thing and getting paid. What was he meaning by all this? I'm going to show everybody how to do it. It was cryptic as hell.
It's so wild, right? Because so we do know that he lost a promotion, right? Real Fight Inc. So he is going to have his own promotion. He says in that promotion, he wants to have MMA, boxing, and jiu-jitsu all under one roof. So he wants to do all that moving forward. I don't think that will be his fighting home. I don't think, I think there was some speculation there that, that would be where he would compete next. I don't think that's the case. I think he wants to, focus on promoting other athletes. It's funny, though, when you say as a manager, because I just think of how unique Nate and Nick Diaz are and how difficult they are to deal with at times, but it's worked for them. It's just like, I don't know, like, could they just advise somebody like, bro, you know how you really make this work? Like, show up like 3 hours late and smoke weed while you're there. You know what I mean? Like, they're just so unique. I do think it's boxing next. From everything I've heard is that, they've had discussions with Jake Paul and having a boxing match at some point. Now, what's interesting about that is Jake Paul is already scheduled right now to fight Anderson Silva, which Anderson Silva, 47 years old at this point, but still, I think this is a real match. I mean, Anderson Silva is by far the most talented striker that Jake Paul has ever faced. If Anderson Silva tunes him up, do people still want to see Jake Paul fight Nate Diaz? I'm not sure. Does that end the – and I'm not saying that'll necessarily happen. I mean, I can't even believe I'm breaking down Anderson Silva, Jake Paul. I think Anderson Silva should win, but if Jake Paul is able to extend it, maybe Anderson does show his age a little bit in later rounds. Jake is a big, strong guy. But if Anderson wins convincingly, do people want to still see Jake Paul box Nate Diaz? I don't know. So I guess we'll have to see all that plays out. Nate Diaz will be there for that fight. One of his teammates, Chris Avila, is fighting on the card, so he's going to be there anyway. So, I mean, that, you can already set it up. If Jake wins, he starts calling him out. I mean, you can see the writing on the wall there. So I think he wants to go do that. And understandably so, because there's good money in there. I mean, there's an opportunity to make really, really good money in kind of a one-off type situation. But then I think ultimately, I do think we'll see him back in the UFC. I do think ultimately see it, that trilogy fight with Conor McGregor. It's got to be there. It's got to be there. Those dudes, I've said it before, I'll say it again. Those dudes, Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz, could each be on 10-fight losing streaks, and you put them together and you sell 1 million pay-per-views. You know what I mean? People want to see that trilogy. So I think we'll see him back in the UFC at some point, but I think he's going to at least explore the idea of going in boxing first.
And before we move on and wrap the show up, I have to give credit where credit's due. Jake Paul, this guy's got serious power, and a lot of people clown on him. A lot of UFC fighters clown on him. A lot of people in the media, the common fan, who's this YouTuber, this, Disney kid this is a 220-pound grown-ass man who's got hands, and anybody who's going to just lights out Tyrone Woodley like that, you have to give credit where credit due. So I walk into this, from an MMA guy, I walk into this optimistic that Anderson can, but you don't want to get hit by that guy. And he's a smooth enough, trained pro boxer. I mean, I went back and I watched his, Hasim Rockman Jr. sparring footage. He looked phenomenal against him. The guy's the real deal, and we have to give him credit.
He's been putting in the work. Listen, Jake Paul has made a ton of money that has allowed him to basically be able to commit his entire life to bettering himself. And he's a natural athlete, right? He's got, high school wrestling background, and that's what I mean. He grew up with an athletic background. He wasn't boxing, but, you can tell he's got an athletic build. Obviously, he's got some natural athleticism. And then again, he's made this money as an influencer that's allowed him to, get the best coaching available, dedicate his time 100% to getting better. And you can see the kid can box. I mean, so yeah, if you're going to just doubt on him, and not only can the kid box, the kid can stir up interest as well, man. You have to give him respect for his hustle. Even if you don't like it, you have to give him respect for that. I do think, look, Anderson Silva is one of the greatest strikers in MMA history. There's no question about it. I do think early on, I think Jake will struggle to hit Anderson Silva because Anderson's movement is so good. I mean, you go back to vintage Anderson. I mean, the highlight of him against Forrest Griffin is just unbelievable, right? Where he's entering the matrix and just slipping punches. I mean, it's unbelievable. And I think he'll be able to show that early. But again, Father Time catches up to everybody at some point, right? Is he too old at that point where he can't continue to do that all the way to the end? we'll see. But it is a competitive matchup, and I'll be interested. I wasn't all that interested in the Jake Paul Hasim Rahman fight, if I'm being honest with you. I mean, I would have probably caught some highlights. This one, I'm intrigued, man. I'm intrigued.
Sounds good. Now moving ahead, UFC Fight Night 210. What can we expect from this card? Not a lot of star power on it, but Corey Sandhagen, when he's on a card you want to watch.
Yeah, Corey Sandhagen, Song Yadong, that's a good fight in the bantamweight division. Two really, really talented young athletes. That'll be a fantastic main event. And that division, 135, is just absolutely stacked right now. So, I mean, it's worth watching that. And look, there's some other names on here. I mean, Damon Jackson versus Pat Sabatini. That should be a fantastic matchup there. You got Loma Lukbunmi, who's always a fun fighter to watch, is on there as well. Nicholas Mo. I mean, there are some names there. I think it's going to be an entertaining night. There's nothing that you look at here and you just go, okay, we're going to determine a number one contender. But that's kind of what this is, right? I mean, the UFC, especially under the ESPN era, is doing a great job of stacking the pay-per-views so that they're like, man, loaded up. And then consequently, that means the fight night cards that happen a week later, might not necessarily be the most talent stacked lineups that you've ever seen, but these are athletes that are developing and that are trying to move forward. Chidi Njokuani, Gregory Rodriguez could be a great fight. I mean, there's good fights on here, none that are going to determine a future title contender, but if you're a fight fan, you're going to tune in and you're going to get some entertainment.
Yep, I'm actually, Sandhagen, and he's fun to watch. I mean, some of the, he's got chops on the ground, some of the highlight KO he's had is I encourage everybody to check it out because he's a force to be playing with in that bantamweight division. Getting ready to wrap up our episode here of Cageside with John Morgan. You could follow John Morgan at JohnMorgan_MMA or myself E_Mac Life. Go ahead. Watch us on YouTube or at grindcitymedia.com. Have a listen to us on SoundCloud and or Apple Podcast and or Spotify. Now, tremendously sad day. I mean, I didn't want to start the show off with this because of the craziness of the weekend, but we got to give we have to give this moment. Elias Theodorou passed away yesterday from liver cancer at the age of 34. He was a fantastic fighter, 8-3 in the UFC. The tributes from the MMA community and his fellow fighters are just scrolling in. Right when we started recording this, I went and looked at more. Everybody has just the greatest things to say about him. So much is that the one that really struck out to me was Michael Chiesa. I don't know if you've seen this yet. And he said, Absolutely. The guy will literally give you the shirt off his back. I am holding a sports coat that I had to go to a press conference. I did not have a sports coat. He gave it to me off his back. That's the type of guy he was. 8-3. And his only 3 losses in the UFC came to Thiago Santos, Derek Brunson, and Brad Tavares. I mean, a murder's row there. And, one thing that kind of makes me sad is I remember watching him. How can you not? The guy was like just this great looking guy, chiseled out of granite, great fighter. Like one of those guys that you're like, man, this guy's got it all. And it just pisses me off because he's just got it all and I don't. But from all accounts, he was an awesome person. And I know you've had a few interactions with him. And I just want to hear from you.
Yeah, I mean, you see everything roll in and you realize, how loved Elias was. And this one was shocking because, first of all, as I said, 34 years old. I mean, 34 years old. And the thing was, he was battling cancer but didn't tell anybody. And nobody knew other than his closest. I had no idea. I had never heard anything like it. A lot of times, even these things that people try to keep close to the vest, kind of word gets out a little bit. But it was clear that his circle didn't want anybody to know that. So it was just shocking. It's one of those ones you read and you're like, what? Like that can't be, but confirmed by his camp. And as I said last night, when I saw Aaron Bronstetter tweeting the confirmation, just immediately when I think of Elias Theodorou, like I think of the laugh that he had. He was just this infectious personality, man. He was a bright light. You know what I mean? He was always just cheerful and in a good mood. And he had this infectious laugh and just again, as you said, that tribute for Michael Chiesa, I recommend everybody go, let him watch the video. He did like a quick little, minute video where he talked about the incident. You could see the emotion that he's battling back. Even Jeff, a lot of people talk about what the personality was, always upbeat. Always, I mean, the guy did ring card boy duties for Invicta FC, the all female. He was like, okay, hold on, if there's an all women's promotion, then I'm going to be the male ring card guy. Let's go. I mean, that's the kind of guy he was, doing fun stuff, but also did some great things behind the scene for cannabis use. You saw Jeff Nowitzki, the UFC executive, who tweeted out rest in peace, Elias Theodorou. He said a great person, a huge voice for the more fair and equitable treatment of marijuana use in MMA and sports. I mean, he was working behind the scenes to kind of change the way that marijuana use and cannabis use was handled within sport, not just mixed martial arts, but within sport as well. So, was trying to make a difference. And as you said, a talented fighter, and had a lot of great things going on. You heard about a lot of the projects that he was doing. And like I said, every interaction I ever had with Elias, he was always upbeat, positive, trying to do good things in this world. And it just goes to show you how unfair life can be sometimes, man, that a guy, an elite level, incredible athlete, great personality, great voice, working for change and for good, is strucken down at the age of 34 from cancer. As it soaked in last night, I looked over at my wife because I suddenly realized, like, my son was born when I was 34. You know what I mean? Like, that's just like a beginning of life. You know what I mean? Like, as you know, as a father, it's just, so it's like, as amazing as his life was, like, it ended at a time where he barely even got to live it. You know what I mean? As much as he got to do, there was so much more that would have been out there for him. And for that to be taken away at 34, a shocker to everybody. And as you said, the tributes pour in because he was that good of a dude. And I never knew anybody that had a bad interaction with him. And it just, life is not fair sometimes, and nothing is guaranteed. And I think it's such a reminder that, like, as it may sound like a cliche, is to live every minute of it, man, and soak in every minute of it, because you're not guaranteed anything.
It's very tragic. It's very sad. And the one thing, when I didn't read it until this morning, I woke up this morning at about 4:45, and I'm scrolling through Twitter as I'm brushing my teeth, and I just, to hear that he was 34 years old, it literally broke my heart. What a lot of people don't know about me is I battled my own battle with cancer when I was 27 years old, and I fought it for about a year. I eventually beat it. But the one thing, when I read it, the first thing I thought about it, why did I get so lucky? Why did I get so lucky? And this guy not? And the crazy thing is, he fought a year and a half ago. He had his last fight. He went 3-0 outside of the UFC. He was healthy. He was everything. And then it just shows how tremendously cruel sometimes life can be, how unfair it is. And, hopefully there's a bigger purpose out there. I don't want to get into that now, but I have to hope that there's a bigger purpose out there, because it's just sad. It's unfair. Elias Theodorou, winner of the Ultimate Fighter Nations, 34 years old, died of cancer. And may he rest in peace. And with that note, we just want to leave you on that. We can honor his memory, honor the tremendous talent that he was, and from all accounts, the tremendous person that he was. Tune in next week. Cageside with John Morgan. For John Morgan, I'm Eric McMahon. We'll see you later.